welcome back to our channel. Today we are covering AWS Certified Cloud Practitioner Certification. To find the complete list of questions and answers, please go to the playlist link provided in the description. Our team is working hard to keep the content up to date. If you find this video helpful, let us know in the comment. We really appreciate if you like and subscribe to our channel. Today's question is: a developer has written code for an application and wants to share it with other developers on the team to receive feedback. The shared application code needs to be stored long term with multiple versions and batch change tracking. Which AWS service should the developer use? Option A, AWS Code Build. Option B, Amazon S3. Option C, AWS Code Commit. And option D, AWS Cloud9. The correct answer is option C. Next question is: an application is using Amazon DynamoDB as its data store and should be able to read 100 times per second at strongly consistent rates, each item in 5 KB in size. To what value should the table's provision read throughput be set? Option A, 50 RAID capacity units. Option B, 100 RAID capacity units. Option C, 200 RAID capacity units. And option D, 500 RAID capacity units. The correct answer is option C. Moving to next. A company has a serverless application that uses AWS Lambda functions and AWS Systems Manager parameters to store configuration data. The company moves the Lambda functions inside the VPC and into private subnets. The Lambda functions are now producing errors in their attempts to access Systems Manager parameters. Which solution will allow the Lambda functions to access Systems Manager parameters inside the VPC? Option A, configure security groups to allow access to Systems Manager. Option B, create an interface VPC endpoint for Systems Manager. Option C, use an internal gateway from inside the VPC. And option D, create a gateway VPC endpoint for Systems Manager. The correct answer is option D. Next question is: an application running on Amazon EC2 opens connections to an Amazon RDS SQL Server database. The developer does not want to store the username and password for the database in the code. The developer would also like to automatically rotate the credentials. What is the most secure way to store and access the database credentials? Option A, create an IAM role that has permissions to access the database. Attach the role to the EC2 instance. Option B, use AWS Secrets Manager to store the credentials. Retrieve the credentials from Secrets Manager as needed. Option C, store the credentials in an encrypted text file in an Amazon S3 bucket. Configure the EC2 instances. User data to download the credentials from Amazon S3 as the instance boots. And option D, store the username and password credentials directly in the source code. No further action is needed because the source code is stored in a private repository. The correct answer is option B. Moving to next question. A developer created a Lambda function for a web application backend. When testing the Lambda function from the AWS Lambda console, the developer can see that the function is being run. but there is no log data being generated in Amazon CloudWatch logs, even after several minutes. What could cause this situation? Option A. The Lambda function does not have any explicit log statements for the log data to send it to CloudWatch logs. Option B. The Lambda function is missing CloudWatch as a source trigger to send log data. Option C. The execution rule for the Lambda function is missing permissions to write log data to the CloudWatch logs. And option D. The Lambda function is missing a target CloudWatch log group. The correct answer is option C. Next question is, a development team is building a new application that will run on Amazon EC2 and use Amazon DynamoDB as a storage layer. The developers all have assigned IAM user accounts in the same IAM group. The developers currently can launch EC2 instances, and they need to be able to launch EC2 instances with an instance role allowing access to Amazon DynamoDB. Which AWS IAM changes are needed when creating an instance role to provide this functionality? Uh, please go through the options. The correct answer is option B. Next question is, a company has a website that is developed in PHP and is launched using AWS Elastic Beanstalk. There is a new version of the website that needs to be deployed in the Elastic Beanstalk environment. The company cannot tolerate having the website offline. If an update fails, deployment must have minimal impact and roll back as soon as possible. What deployment method should be used? Option A, all at once. Option B, rolling. Option C, snapshots. And option D, immutable. The correct answer is option D. Next question is, a developer is deploying an AWS Lambda function that writes to Amazon DynamoDB. Amazon CloudWatch metrics for the Lambda function show that errors have occurred during some invocations of the function. However, there are no entries available in the CloudWatch logs for the function. The source code for the function shows that the function writes log data before saving data. What should the developer do to address the missing CloudWatch log entries of the Lambda function? Option A, assign permissions to the Lambda function's execution rule to send logs to CloudWatch. Option B, enable CloudWatch Lambda insign, redeploy the Lambda function. Option C, use AWS X-Ray enable active tracing. And option D, add CloudWatch as a trusted identity to the Lambda function's execution role. The correct answer is option B. Moving to next question. A developer is creating an AWS Lambda function that generates a new file each time it runs. Each new file must be checked into an AWS code commit repository hosted in the same AWS account. How should the developer accomplish this? Option A, when the Lambda function starts, use the git CLI to clone the repository, check the new file into the clone repository and push the change. Option B. After the new file is created in Lambda, use curl to invoke the code commit API, send the file to the repository. Option C. Use an AWS SDK to instantiate a code commit client, invoke the put file method to add the file to the repository. And option D. Upload the new file to an Amazon S3 bucket, create an AWS step function to accept S3 events in the step function, add the new file to the repository. The correct answer is option C. Moving to next question. A company is using an AWS Lambda function to process records from an Amazon Nessus data stream. The company recently observed slow processing of the records. A developer notices that the iterator age metric for the function is increasing and that the Lambda run duration is constantly above normal. Which actions should the developer take to increase the processing speed? Select two options. Option A. Increase the number of shards of the Nessus data stream. Option B. Decrease the timeout of the Lambda function. Option C. Increase the memory that is allocated to the Lambda function. Option D. Decrease the number of shards of the Nessus data stream. And option E. Increase the timeout of the Lambda function. The correct answer is option A and C. Thank you.